let me share with you what our cash flow is king process looks like. So here's our 5-step process. Number 1, what gets measured gets done. This is ultimately a goal setting process, and all your goals need to be measured. Now, I'm not going to go through setting up your goals and SMART goal process. We can save that for another video, but I really want you to understand is what gets measured gets done. Everything you need to accomplish in life needs to be measured. The easiest thing is one time I was at an event, and a gentleman came up to me and he said, I want to be a better basketball player. And he was setting his goals. I said, show me a better basketball player. You can't. But what you can show me is shooting 50% from the field and 80% from the free throw line, right? You can show a measurable increase. So what gets measured gets done. And we'll take this a step further in a later slide and video about maximizing your revenue and maximizing your cash flow, because what gets measured gets done. Number 2 is start with the end in mind. When do you want to accomplish what you want to accomplish? Number 3, work backwards. So essentially you have to reverse engineer everything you want in life. If you want $1 million, you got to reverse engineer it. So $1 million, what gets measured? Start with the end in mind. When do you want it? And then you got to work backwards. So you got to break it down into bite-sized increments. And so ultimately what I say is this: if you're not accomplishing what you want to accomplish in a year, and you're measuring it every year, you got to reverse back and say, how do I measure this quarterly? If you're not hitting your goals quarterly, you got to break it down monthly. If you're not hitting your goals monthly, you got to break it down weekly. And if you're not hitting your goals weekly, you got to start breaking it down daily. And we'll explain this in a moment. Number 4 is actionable increments. Really, this is what breaks it all down. Is what are those small incremental things that you can do every day that creates discipline? See, we try to accomplish our goals, but it's really breaking it down to very small micro actions that you do every day, that you do consistently. It's just like if you want to be in shape, it's that hour a day that you need to make sure that you're working on your muscles. If you want to have more mental clarity, you got to say, how do I work on my mind for maybe an hour a day? If you want to have the financial clarity and the cash flow we're talking about, or what are those actionable increments that you can put in place to maximize your cash flow? And we'll explain some of that in a moment. And then lastly is self-to-self measurement. It's the same thing as I just said, is when do you want to measure your successes? Do you want to do it on a yearly basis, quarterly basis, monthly basis, weekly basis, or daily basis? So you have to have those self-to-self measurement, which are just signposts in time, dates that you're going to go and review your cash flow is king process and your goals. So let me apply my cash flow is king process to revenue. And the reason is revenue is you think cash flow is all bottom line, but it's not true. Revenue cures all. The higher you grow your revenue, the higher you're going to grow your cash flow. If you're just thinking about cash flow, there's only so much you can do to maximize your cash flow by cutting costs. The best way to maximize your cash flow is by growing your revenue. And so revenue cures all. So let's put together the cash flow is king process to your revenue. So you remember a minute ago I was talking about revenue cures all. And so here it is. Remember I was talking about what gets measured gets done. This is about setting your goals and in a measurable way. And so number 1, let's just say that you want to have $1 million in revenue in your pocket or in your business. So how do you get $1 million in revenue? Well, when do you want to accomplish that by? So start with the end in mind. So let's say in 12 months you want to have a total of $1 million in revenue. What does that look like? Well, you got to work backwards. And so that's $250,000 per quarter. That's $83,000 per month in revenue, or that's $19,230 per week in revenue. Now that's not good enough, but that's a bite-sized chunk. Sometimes when you think of $1 million, it seems so esoteric, it seems so big that when you work backwards and move it down to these bite-sized chunks, you could start thinking about, how do I start accomplishing this? You could even work backwards a little bit further. You know, what is your average sale? How many sales is that per week? How many sales is that per month? How many sales is that per quarter? You could even break that down further to leads. And so ultimately that breaks down to your actionable increments, because you need to know is how much you need to fill your funnel, how many leads you need in your funnel, what's your closing ratio, and then you can start identifying what's my marketing funnel. How do I get a mass amount of people into this marketing funnel so I can start marketing to them and then move them over to our sales funnel? And how many people do I need in my marketing funnel at all times? And how many people do I need in my sales funnel at all times? And what does that look like? We have an 11-point strategy that are different actionable increments to maximize your marketing funnel and maximize your sales funnel and maximize your revenue. But this is all about cash flow. So we want to get you on a plan where you're starting to identify what are my goals and then work backwards and then break those down into actionable increments of what do I need to do every day and every week, every month, and every quarter to maximize my marketing funnel, my sales funnel, but maximize my top line revenue number. And then lastly, self-to-self measurement. When do you want to measure this? Do you want to measure this lead system every day, every week, every month, every quarter, or every year? So the big thing is to get started. Get started with the process of understanding the cash flow is king revenue maximization model, because revenue cures all. Now let's turn this over to cash flow is king profits and cash flow into your pocket. So let's say what gets measured gets done. You want to put $333,000 into your pocket. So that would be start with the end in mind. When you want to do this by 12 months. Work backwards. $83,000 per quarter, $28,000 per month, and $7,000 per week that would go into your pocket. Now, what are those actionable increments to make sure you're maximizing this? What are your fixed expenses? What are your variable expenses? Are they in line? Can we lower your fixed expenses by creating more value in increasing your revenue? Can we change your variable expenses by measuring them properly? Maybe these are your marketing expenses. Are you getting value out of all your marketing? It's all about measuring and understanding the rate of return on those variable expenses so you can maximize your cash flow. And then lastly is self-to-self measurement. When do you want to measure this? Do you want to measure this on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, quarterly basis? And it really depends on your mindset. If you're the revenue guy or lady, you're probably not going to you're not measuring your cash flow every day. But if you're a profit person, you're probably measuring your cash flow every day and then measuring your revenue at a later time. So how do you put this in place to really maximize what you're doing so you can maximize your cash flow and maximize what you're putting into your pocket every day? Now let me show you the cash flow is king process when it relates to your profit and maximizing your cash flow. Number one, what gets measured gets done. So let's say you wanted a $333,000 cash flow to you as the owner. Number two, we're going to start with the end in mind. So let's say we want this in 12 months. That's our target, and that's our target date. Number three, you got to work backwards. So you got to reverse engineer exactly what you want to happen. So that'd be $83,000 per quarter, $28,000 per month, $7,000 per week. And then you got to break that into actionable increments. How do we get you there? Now, we already showed you that revenue cures all, but you have to look at your fixed expenses. Control your fixed expenses. How do we maximize and make sure that you're paying the least amount for all your fixed expenses and negotiate those? Number two is the variable expenses. How do we plan for the variable expenses and make sure that we're held accountable to what's coming next, and how we planning for that and putting money aside for those variable expenses so not to be surprised. Number five then is self-to-self measurement. When do you want to measure this cash flow is king process? Do you want to do it on a yearly basis? Remember, if you're not hitting your goal on a yearly basis, we got to break that down to quarterly. If you're not doing it on a quarterly basis, we want to break that down to monthly, then weekly, and then daily. So we want to make sure that you're maximizing your cash flow, not being redundant with the measurement, but making sure that we have different signposts to measure to make sure you're maximizing the cash flow is king process and maximizing the cash flow that's going into your pocket with a profit first mentality. Pay yourself first and then pay all your other expenses second. Here are the results for the cash flow is king process. Number one, get a hold of your emotional spending. Number two, get a hold of that variable spending. Number three, maximize your revenue. Number four, maximize your cash flow. Number five, put $5,000 plus back in your pocket. We usually do this either on an annual basis or a monthly basis, depending on the size of your business. How do you get started with the cash flow is king process? Number one, you're going to get the cash flow is king process done for you. Number two, we're going to do monthly accounting. So we'll have everything done for you. Number three, we'll provide reporting. We do this reporting on a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly or quarterly basis, whatever is most pertinent to you and your business for your success. Number four, we'll do one-on-one review, again, on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, or even quarterly basis, whatever is pertinent for you and your business's success. Number five, we provide accountability. This is key to get rid of that emotional spending, understand the variable spending, and eliminate and decrease your fixed spending. Number six is hit your targets. When you know where you're going and you know where you're at, it's easy to get there and to exceed them. So to get started, give us a call at 312-330-5094 or text us at 312-330-5094, or you can email me at matt@linkbizsolutions.com. The best thing to do is send us 2 times that work for you, and we'll confirm the best one that works for us, and we'll get you scheduled and get you on your way to your cash flow is king process.